Hi, my name is Winslet, and welcome to my video on diving into screenshots I took from the second gameplay stream covering Empires and Ashes, which is the second expansion for Age of Wonders 4. Just like I've done with previous gameplay streams by the devs, I went through and took screenshots of all the interesting numbers and details that popped up for a few seconds so that we can look at them in detail together. I will have timestamps in the description below, so if you want to jump to any particular topic, please feel free to. I'll also be posting these images to my video thread on the official Age of Wonders 4 forum. An important disclaimer, a lot of the numbers and details here are likely to change at some point throughout the development of Age of Wonders 4. We still have two more big expansions on the roadmap after Empires and Ashes, so we're very likely going to see a lot of these numbers change around the time of those releases and maybe even afterwards as well. So without further ado, let's start looking at these screenshots. So this first screenshot shows off how you can apply distracted using weapons with the inflict distracted infusion. So if you start with the Reclaimer's Society trait and you get to some haste berries, then you can get access to a very, very strong ability. This basically allows you to deal a lot more damage to the targets that get distracted applied to them because it's easier to get the flanking effect, which I think gives you plus 25% damage on attacks. Of course, you could go behind them and flank them the normal way, or if you apply distracted, you can do it from anywhere on the battlefield. And that's quite powerful. I believe the devs combined inflict distracted with frenzy and uh, something that gave extra retaliation damage to make it into a tier 4 item. But if we look here at this second screenshot, the two uh, infusions that are on it, the extra uh, retaliation and the inflict distracted, both of those will make this a tier 2 item, which costs 180 binding essence and takes 3 turns to complete. And when we compare that to this next one, I think the 2 infusion points turn this up from a tier 2 item to a tier 4 item, and that's going to take 4 turns to complete. So I think the turns may have to do with the number of infusions on here, whereas the cost may be more associated with the tier and the things that you pick alongside it. I'm not sure if all tier 4 items are going to be 325 binding essence, but I have a feeling that may be different. You can only have one active infusion. That's the thing on the right. The one they have access to at the beginning of the game is provoke or taunt. I think it's a single action attack that makes enemies attack you. So all in all, not the best one. I believe later on they got access to Archon Blood, which allowed them to use an active ability to um, resurrect the dead or to put that on their items. I don't remember if they actually ended up putting that on an item. I just think they showed off that they had access to that infusion. This next screenshot shows that it takes 40 war spoils to keep a tier 2 unit that was, I think, subdued by an overseer, and I believe it takes 20 war spoils to recruit a tier 1 unit. I can't remember off the top of my head how many war spoils they got from a fight against a free city, but I think it was something close to 40 war spoils. So this is kind of like one fight's worth of war spoils, I believe. And yeah, I'm not too sure how easy it will be to get more war spoils as you go across the map. That'll probably depend a little bit on the map settings you're playing on. After that, we have heroes can mark target. It's a free action. I think that says 5 range to make a target marked. Anything that's free action is generally pretty useful and easy to apply because it's useful because it's easy to apply. And there's a lot of systems inside of the Reaver culture that interact with marked. I think focus aggression gives you plus 10% damage, so having another free action thing that can help you apply marked is quite useful. If I remember correctly, I think the observers need an action to apply marked, and that's kind of like all they do. And there's a few other things that can apply marked in the Reaver roster. Archon Blood lets you raise the dead. Yeah, we mentioned that earlier, but I got a screenshot that shows off the effects. I believe this is the same ability that was in the game before the Empire's and Ashes or before the Golem update. Um, but yeah, it's just, comes back at 60% HP. That's really great if you're fighting against somebody who's got Keeper's Mark on their units, so that, your zombies that you resurrect, they'll keep those things like Keeper's Mark and um, be harder to get rid of. There's also the ability to summon animals from haste berries. I think here this is a ability infusion, an active ability infusion that they got access to after they'd collected a couple materials. I don't think all of these are from haste berries, but it may be like spawn hatchling and conjure animal are from that, and then raise undead would be from the Archon Blood, and maybe magic missile could be too. I'm not sure if heal or magic missile are from a third magic material. Overcharge is a one range free action from supports. It can stun friendly constructs. So when I first saw that Overcharge is going to be in Age of Wonders 4, my interpretation was that this would work the same way Overcharge worked in Age of Wonders Planetfall, but I think it's slightly different. Instead of your abilities having a chance to stun the enemies like it did in Age of Wonders Planetfall, there is now a 30% chance that a unit will become stunned when they are attacking. So your units will deal a lot more base damage, but they may end up stopping halfway through their turn, halfway through their action points. If they've got like repeating attacks, they may do one, get stunned, and not get to use the two remaining melee attacks or ranged attacks. I think most of the constructs, if not all of them, are melee focused because we have the uh, Iron Golem, we have the Copper Golem, and I think Bronze Golem are all constructs. Oh wait, no, they did mention that the Ironclad is also a construct, so that guy has a ranged attack that can repeat. So getting stunned on the first one could be kind of annoying, but maybe a dice roll that is worth taking if it allows you to play a lot of status effects to a lot of enemies or kill off a lot of enemies from relatively far away. I think the Ironclad's attack was a pretty big range. It's supposed to act a bit like artillery, right? Or that's what I remember from like Dev Diaries and streams. Have we seen this in action in a stream? I don't think so, actually. It's maybe only in the trailer. So yeah, you need supports in order to apply this. It's a one range support ability, so they need to be relatively close to the constructs who are mostly melee focused. I think this could be quite good, quite competitive in like multiplayer, but it's hard to say just looking at the numbers right now. Warding, I think, is a new effect that acts like reinforce. This says that they have +3 resistance against magic attacks, and you can get access to that through the Tome of the Dread. And I think it's called Tuning Kits that gives you access to this on your shield units and your constructs. Doesn't go in all of your units, but it could be a good way to make certain strategies a lot tankier, a lot harder to deal with. Seals cannot be annexed or made into friendly or slash hostile domain, meaning they're going to be harder to defend. I think Bass talked about how they decided that it shouldn't become part of your territory because there's a lot of things that benefit you when you're standing in friendly territory, and there's a few that benefit you when you're standing in hostile territory. But I think the main thing that happens in hostile territory is it keeps you from healing over time. By putting it in neutral domain, it's going to make it easier for the seals to pass between the different players and for people to interfere with somebody who's getting close to the seals victory type. What else do we have here about the seals victory? I think I took a screenshot of that just so we could talk about how they are controlled by having a unit standing on it. It's not the last person to stand on it. You need to actively have a unit on there to get those points. I don't believe it needs to be a hero. I think it could be any unit. After that, I think they showed off a naval map, which looks pretty cool. This is very different than what I remember the land or the ocean looking like in previous versions of the game. I know Bass mentioned something about movement and how you can't have land units on the land because the melee boats would never be able to attack them, but you can use flying units to go around or um, maybe above the land so that melee boats or ranged boats have less ability to set up attacks on you. It's definitely something that I want to see more in practice because that sounds pretty interesting. I remember Planetfall having some interesting things you could do with the lakes that were impassable. You could just have the AI ignore your units sometimes by having them hang out above certain places on the map where there's no ability to melee attack them. It's been years since I looked at that, but I'm curious if some of those systems or strategies have made their way into Age of Wonders Planetfall with the new naval maps. Hero boats have three sails, right? All the boats are slightly different depending on what they are. I think the ranged ones now have a bastila on front, whereas the clerics seem to have some kind of shrine thing up there. And I'm not sure what the melee guys have, but it might be like a ram of some kind or a big shield like thing in the front. But that's cool from a aesthetic point of view. I think it really gives them more personality. Specifically, I really like the heroes having three sails on their boats. I think that looks awesome. One thing Bass did talk about is how Sunken Ruins work with land-based adjacency bonuses. So you can have something like a quarry, something like a farm, or something like a research post from this Sunken Ruin. I'm not sure if all of them had the same thing, but at least this one has those three choices. And that sounds pretty cool. I think having the fisheries work differently than everything else made sense. From a design point of view, but then in practice, when you were actually trying to make the most with your land, it made it harder to use ocean unless you're going for an all ocean strategy. I know some people were doing uh, the guild that you get from having a lot of boat tiles and saying that it was pretty strong, pretty powerful when you got it working right. But I never played around with it, and always avoided the ocean tiles as much as possible. I think that has to do with the fact that it didn't boost things as well. Now I believe Sunken Ruin should help you accomplish your boosts in your city center a little bit more easily. And that's actually all I had for screenshots. I believe since this was well, because this was our second stream, they were focused more on having fun and playing the game versus showing off specific things that are coming out in Empires and Ashes. And yeah, I thought it was a nice, fun way to uh, experience things. So yeah, without since I don't have anything else to add here, I think we'll wrap up, and I'll see you around. Have a good one.